FLM, wide open thinking, world-class work, and far-reaching results. Now with locations in Minneapolis, Columbus, Indianapolis, and Washington, D.C. A strategic marketing and communications company dedicated to serving clients who specialize in the business of agriculture and the life of rural communities.
Thanks for joining us for our latest Meet the Farmhands video, joined today by Jon Doggett from the National Corn Growers Association. Jon, thanks for taking the time to join us.
Thank you for having me.
For starters, can you just kind of give us a general overview of your career, the places you've been, the places you've worked, as far back as you'd like to go, all the way up until today?
Oh boy, well, I'm a Montana ranch kid. Grew up on a cattle and sheep ranch, 100 miles from the nearest stoplight. Went to the University of Montana. While I was there in western Montana, I managed and sold real estate. I managed to buy some real estate, which was not a good investment in the late 70s, early 80s. The western Montana economy got pretty tough about then, and got married in 1980, and we ended up in Billings, Montana, where my wife's from. In 1981, I went to work for the Ag Division of BorgWarner Acceptance Corporation. We financed farm equipment, wholesale and retail. We were the biggest financiers for Big Bud tractors about the time they went into bankruptcy. I repossessed farm equipment for a while, and that was not a lot of fun. Then I went to work for Allis-Chalmers Corporation. I was district manager for Montana and northern Wyoming. The year before I started, it was the largest combine district in North America. Sold 125 combines in that district. And shortly after I started there, we went into a drought, and then we had the PIC program. We sold 6 combines in the district. Largest dealer in the district went into bankruptcy. And then it was an interesting company to work for. They were bought by Deutz, and then they were going into receivership, and so I became a stockbroker and in Billings. And then in October of '87, the market went crazy, and found myself looking for a job yet again. So there were some tough times there and some lessons learned, and a friend of mine called and said, Congressman Ron Marlinet's looking for somebody to do his ag stuff. And I said, well, listen, every place I've been, everything I've touched here in the previous 4 jobs has not turned out really good. And, does he really want me around? But, eventually I got talked into coming out, and my wife Nancy and I convinced my parents that we were coming to Washington, D.C. For 2 years, 5 at the very most. And that was 1988. Math is hard. So came out here, worked for Ron for 3 years. He was, at that time Montana had 2 members of Congress on the House side, and Ron had the eastern 2/3. He was on the Ag Committee. He was on what was then called the Interior Committee. On the Ag Committee, he was the ranking member for what was called the Wheat, Feed Grains, and Oilseeds Subcommittee. And Dan Glickman was the chair of that subcommittee, and Ron was the ranking member. When I came out here in February of '88, learned a lot real fast, and it wasn't many more months than we were in the middle of the '88 drought, and working on the 1988 drought bill, which was a huge learning experience for me, and it was fun watching that process and how that evolved, and of course the huge need for agriculture to have some assistance after that drought.
And then after Capitol Hill, you move over to American Farm Bureau?
No, after Capitol Hill, I went to the cattlemen for a while. I was
Okay.
at the Public Lands Council, National Cattlemen's Association. I was there a very short period of time. My friend Dennis Stolte, who worked for the Farm Bureau, doing the same issues I was doing over at the Cattlemen, the federal lands issues. Dennis called and said, hey, I'm getting married, and my new bride and I are going to take our sailboat out for about 6 months, and I'm leaving the Farm Bureau. Why don't you come in and talk to John Datt and see if he'd hire you? And John Datt was a long-time figure in this town around ag circles. He had been the head of the Washington office for 30-some years. I was the last lobbyist that John hired, and so I started there that would have been 1991, and was there. I didn't think that was the time we were still thinking maybe we could go back to Montana, but No, I was there for 11 years and then came over here in 2002.
Okay, so came to National Corn in '02.
Right.
With that in mind, how in the heck does a Montana ranch kid end up coming out and lobbying for the interests of corn farmers? Because, I mean, there's some corn in the state of Montana, but it's hardly a powerhouse
no,
commodity
it's
in that
not.
state.
And the thing is that, is I have found that if you come from a state where you don't have a state affiliate, it works really, really well. So, the good people at Montana Farm Bureau kept calling me, and I was kind of their personal lobbyist. But it was fun. But no, it's good to have a little bit of detachment from the industry. I enjoy working in agriculture, working with farmers and ranchers. But it's a little bit of detachment at this point was not all bad.
Mm-hmm. But with that in mind, there had to have been a learning curve of sorts, trying to figure out things like ethanol policy,
Sure,
corn policy,
sure.
things like that, as opposed to federal
Right.
and public land.
So when I was at the Farm Bureau, I ended up doing ethanol after a couple years, and really enjoyed the ethanol issue, and we really ran with it, and there were a lot of things happening at that time. That was about the time we were starting to do what became the 2005 energy bill. It took a long time, 5 years of work to get there. So yeah, it's interesting. I've handled so many different issues since I've been in Washington. I know things about malt barley and malt barley programs from the 80s, and there's just a lot of things that I've worked on. It's been a lot of fun. On the job I have now, I know less and less about more and more, and so it's been interesting. It's been challenging.
So in all of your various stops throughout the course of Washington, how have you seen ag's weight on Capitol Hill change?
Oh, it's changed significantly. Very, very different. In rural America, there were a lot of moderate Democrats that represented rural areas in the House of Representatives and in the Senate, but particularly in the House of Representatives. Most of those moderate Democrats are gone. Colin Peterson's one of the last ones left. And but you had a lot of moderates that represented agricultural districts, and they're gone now, and they've been replaced more by the very conservative Republicans. Rural districts they're voting Republican, they're voting social issues, they're not voting their pocketbook issues. So when you replace an Earl Pomeroy, or you replace some other of those conservative Democrats with very, very conservative Republicans who are elected under other issues, that's, I think, has probably been the biggest change in the impact Washington has in this town.
So how does that change the approach that you take when you go to Capitol Hill? The fact that you're lobbying maybe the more conservative Republican base as opposed to the more moderate Democratic base for some of those swing voter issues on ag policy.
Sure, and it makes it more difficult to tie the interests of the district, the ag part of that district, to that member of Congress. That member is they don't say it directly, but that member is being elected because of guns, gays, and abortion, where the moderate Democrat was much more in tune to some of the ag issues, and social issues were not as big a part of the equation as they are now. And certainly we saw that in the reaction to Obamacare. Some of the efforts by the Democrats on climate change, and a real pushback across the country, not just in ag districts, but certainly rural districts were very much affected.
Mm-hmm. And it seems that obviously ag lobbyists can stay pretty busy on a wide variety of issues, but the big thing that they're all trying to get on the same team on, and we're seeing this right now, is gathering up some support for a farm bill.
Sure.
And so how have you seen, since the first farm bill that you worked on, how have you seen that coalition evolve as far as who it takes to
Sure.
pass a farm bill?
Well, in 1985, the environmental community came to town, and they wanted to be part of the farm bill. And we were all shocked that in 1990 they came back and they were going to be a part of that from then on, and have been. Now we're seeing the conservative groups, Club for Growth and Heritage Foundation, very much part of the discussion around farm policy. So that has changed, and so we're looking at expanding the folks that we work with and can find common ground with. to work together on Farm Bill issues. We're a lot better connected, a lot closer connected to the nutrition community than we've ever been. And I think that's really important. We're much more involved and much better connected with some of the conservation groups, the ducks folks and the Pheasants Forever, those folks. We got really close to them to protect crop insurance in the last Farm Bill. So, those concentric circles keep getting built, and I think a lot of people are understanding that the Farm Bill touches a lot more things than just farmers.
What do you think that does to the actual policy, though? Because I think a little bit, an issue that was probably big in your guys' corner was the loss of direct payments with the last Farm Bill. Do you think things like that could continue to happen? Maybe the Farm Bill gets a little less farmer-centric and gets a little bit broader into the nutrition and conservation and things like that, into those communities. Do you think we might see that as we move into future bills?
Absolutely. I think it's very definitely the Farm Bill is going to have to be about more than farmers in order to get a bill that helps farmers. So we're going to have to realize that by building these alliances, by being part of these coalitions, everybody's going to benefit. A rising tide floats all boats.
And as you look back at your career, a couple of farm bills in there, there's an RFS and an RFS2 and some trade promotion authority and some trade agreements. What would you say has been the heaviest legislative lift of your career as you look back on that?
Absolutely the RFS.
Really?
Absolutely, without a doubt. It was the thing that we were most focused on, and the thing that our industry, the ethanol industry, everybody got very, very interested in and very committed to. In the first RFS, we worked with the petroleum industry, we worked with the coal folks. There was a large energy coalition that we were part of, and we got that bill done with all of the energy sector together. In the 08 bill, we worked with the environmental community. So both times we were able to get what we needed by working with other folks who had common interests.
And something you had mentioned as you were discussing, the course of your career was a job that you had in Montana, repossessing farm equipment. I got to imagine that gives you a little bit of a different perspective when you're talking about the issues with the farm economy that are looming right now. I mean, people are wondering how bad that's going to get.
Sure.
I mean, does that ever just kind of sit in the back of your mind of, now who gets that job that I once had?
Right. It isn't in the back of my mind. A lot of days it's in the front of my mind. I remember that. I remember particularly repossessing a disc in Ravalli County, Montana, and I remember very clearly what an emotional thing that was. The farmer was pretty reasonable about it. We went out with the dealer and we were loading it up onto the truck, and I remember that the farmer's wife came out and she screamed at me for probably 45 minutes, and I felt bad because there was nothing I could do about it. And, she was angry, but I think really when I thought about it later that day, and I've thought about it a lot through the years, she wasn't angry, she was afraid. And their life had been turned upside down. The repossession of that disc was only part of what was happening to them. And, to see people in that emotional pain, in that desperation, I've not forgotten that. It
seems that a lot of the lobbyist backgrounds of the folks that we talk to for these interviews, a lot of it is, Capitol Hill, maybe occasional stop at USDA, and then, a few bouncing around at lobbying outfits. But you've got some of that experience, but you also have that variety of experience you talked about in Montana, working with the equipment and working on your own family's operation. Do you think that gives you maybe a little bit of a unique perspective, since you're not just specifically in that Capitol Hill and lobbyist silo, that you also have some other experience to draw upon?
And when I go home, and I go home 3-4 times a year, my brother's still good enough to let me work cattle with him, and we move cattle, and that's a really important part of my life. And that's a connection that I have that's valuable to me. But I came to Washington, I was 32 years old. Nancy and I brought 2 little kids with us, and I wasn't the 22-year-old college grad that had done an internship with the congressman and came out and started kind of at the bottom level on Capitol Hill. So yeah, much different, but I really value the fact that I had some other experiences back in Montana that I think probably helped my career a lot.
All right. Let's shift away from the job and talk about you as an individual for a second. And I usually, when I do these interviews, I look to find a few personal anecdotes. And the personal anecdote for you really just jumped out at me from a variety of different places. You're a certified kayaking instructor.
Right.
Where did that come from? Where did the interest in kayaking come from for you?
You know, I got the certification to teach kayaking lessons. Not so much to teach kayaking lessons. I've helped a couple people through the years. But, you know, mostly it was one of those things I really enjoyed paddling, and the guy who I took a lot of lessons from was offering this certification course, and he said to me, you know, if you really want to get better, you need to learn how to teach, and once you learn how to teach something, you're better at doing it. So I went and did the 4-day thing about 8 years ago. It was the hardest physical thing I've done since 2-a-day football practices back many years ago in Mark County with 8-man football.
So do you take trips then, or do you give lessons, or how does kayaking play a role in your life?
Sure, you know, it's doing something other than lobbying and worrying about politics and worrying about farming and all of those things. And so I paddled a couple different groups. You know, sometimes I go by myself, sometimes I go with a couple different group of people, and so, you know, there's a lot of different opportunities. Get to meet a lot of different people from a lot of different backgrounds, and it's a lot of fun. And just being outside, being outdoors, and having something physical to do rather than sit behind a desk is great.
Yeah. Where's your favorite place you've paddled?
Boy, you know, paddled a lot on the bay. For several years there, worked as a kayak support for the open water swim at the mouth of the Potomac. It's a 7.5 mile swim, and that's always been a lot of fun. I like doing that. You know, we live a mile from the Occoquan Reservoir. That's probably where I paddle the most. But, you know, I've paddled a lot of different places. Paddled in Florida. We'd like to go to South Carolina. I've paddled in some of those areas. So, yeah, it's one of those things that if you're around a body of water, generally you're going to find people who like to paddle, and you can connect with them.
What about family? You said you mentioned that you moved 2 little girls out here when you moved out.
Yeah, 2, boy and a girl. Yeah.
Oh, boy and a girl. Okay.
Yep.
My apologies.
So yeah, and they were little then, and now you know, I kept telling my parents, "Oh, we're coming back." Well, they grew up in the meantime. So our son Andrew is a massage therapist. He lives in Harrisonburg, and he really enjoys what he's doing and is very good at it. Our daughter Katie lives in Tallahassee with her husband, and they are the proud parents of 2 of the best and finest granddaughters in the whole wide world.
Okay. So accruing a few flights down to Florida in the meantime, I suppose.
Yes, we are. And so my wife retired this year after 31 years as an educator. She was a teacher and she was a guidance counselor, and so she finally said enough of this. And so oddly enough, she is probably going to spend most of the winter down in Florida, and being in warm weather, which she likes, and being around the 2 granddaughters, which she loves.
I'll wrap up with this one. If you were to give yourself, when you started your career, any one piece of advice, what would that piece of advice be?
That piece of advice probably, and people will laugh when they hear this, talk less, listen more. Not something a Washington lobbyist does well.
Is that based on personal experience?
Well, you know, I think that you know, with all you're getting, get understanding, and you know, the world is more and more complex all the time, and you need to learn, and you need to pick up things, and that means you have to be quiet and listen more. And I've been blessed with a lot of really great people in my life, a lot of great people in this town. I've had some really great mentors. I've enjoyed working with farmers and ranchers. I think probably the best relationship and the things that have been the part of my career here that's been the best has been working with this great staff. You know, really good people work in this office. I've been, you know, hired some really great people, and you know, I come in the morning and I've got all of these young folks who are really, really smart. They work really, really hard. They have a passion for what they do, and I learn from a lot from them, probably more than they learn from me. And as we were talking before the interview started, it was a little disconcerting to me about a year ago that all of a sudden I realized that the parents of most of the staff are younger than I am, and that was a little hard for me to accept. But no, this has been a great opportunity for me to work here. It's been a great pleasure, and I've really enjoyed the relationships I've had.
Jon, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.